Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Um, if I could just get someone to let me know if they have the audio and that it's clear. Okay, can hear and see you clearly. Alhamdulillah. I hope everyone's well. Inshallah, um, you're all you've all been settled within the month of Ramadan, and I hope that you're not forgetting me in your du'as, and inshallah I won't be forgetting any of you in my du'as. Um, if you guys are okay, we'll just go ahead because I am a few minutes late, and I apologize about that. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah too. By the way, all the people that are saying salam. Okay. So we'll go ahead, inshallah, with the class today. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. So in the last session we spoke in general about Khums. Now I understand, and we did receive a few questions regarding these things, that there are a lot of misconceptions regarding Khums, from A, conflicting ahadith, and B, people who knowingly or unknowingly are trying to undermine the Marja'iyya establishment. We did also mention, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah to the people that are saying salam. We did mention that the issue of conflicting ahadith is not a major issue. You have conflicting ahadith in a lot of the ahkam in Islam. The reason could be one, that they are as a result of taqiyya. The Imams feared for the lives of the Shia, and that is why they would choose to give them different rulings so that they wouldn't be known to the government. Or that the Imams ﷺ themselves feared for their own lives. In one case, the Imam ﷺ, so even though it was the month of Ramadan, but because the ruler at the time had declared the day as Eid, the Imam ﷺ ate on that day. And when someone asked the Imam said that losing one day of the month of Ramadan by not fasting is better to me than losing my own life. And in some cases, maybe there is an issue of authenticity. Point is that conflicting ahadith are not an issue that is exclusive to the topic of Khums. And so that is not an issue, inshallah. We will be addressing some of the misconceptions towards the end, after we finish up the classes on Khums, inshallah. So today, and if you don't mind, I'll just begin with my slides. Okay, wait, hold on. I think we're having a bit of an issue. Okay, we're fine now. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Khums 102. Now, the topic of Khums can have two main branches. One, the applications of Khums. In other words, the types of the instances in which Khums applies, and we'll be talking about that. We'll be looking at some of the titles today, and inshallah, in the next 2 or 3 sessions, inshallah, we will be discussing those. And then we will be talking about people who can receive the money of khums. So, khums applies in khums applies in 7 instances. Number 1 are the spoils of war, and we read the verse in the last session. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ. And this is something that is established by the Quran, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that would be the first thing that inshallah we will be looking at today. And the second fund that the khums tax applies to are the minerals. Now there are preconditions, inshallah we will be talking about that. And minerals are anything that is extracted from the earth. So whether it be gold, silver, copper, gas, even oil. So khums applies to all of these minerals. The third are treasures. So treasures that are found. Now, obviously there's a difference between treasure and minerals. Treasure is, I haven't found any treasure in my life, but I've seen a lot of cartoons where they use this map and they dig it up and they find an old wooden crate and they find treasure in it. So khums applies to treasure as well. Number 4 are minerals, precious minerals extracted from the sea through diving. Now, the reason why I didn't say minerals of the sea is because there are a lot of minerals in the sea. Obviously, there's even salt, or God knows what you can find in the sea. I'm not sure. But when we talk about the ghaus, or the things that we find while diving, we are actually talking about pearls and other precious minerals. So if you keep in mind pearls, that'll be really easy to understand. Number 5 is a land that a disbeliever purchases from the believers. So khums does not generally apply to the disbeliever. However, when a disbeliever buys a piece of land, let's say he buys 1,000 meter or 1,000 square foot of land from a believer, he needs to pay. So in the Islamic government, he would be required to pay 20% of the land, or if he doesn't want to cut up his piece of land, then he needs to pay the equivalent of 20% of his land to the Imam alayhi salam. So that is the 5th instance. And the 6th is when you have money, legitimate money, halal money, mixed with non-halal money, haram money. So let's say that you weren't such a, obviously I'm not talking about you, the viewers, but just a random you. He wasn't a well-behaved young adult, and he worked both at McDonald's and he also sold drugs as a side hustle, and he made some money. Now, when we come and look at the money that he has now in his bank account, we don't know what part of this was acquired through McDonald's, which is halal. Well, not McDonald's, I'd say halal, guys. And what part of it was acquired through haram means, i.e. selling drugs. Now, if it's mixed in a way that he cannot differentiate between the two, in this case, this money is now, is illegitimate, all of it. What he needs to do is pay the khums to the imam, and that purifies the money. It purifies the rest of the money. However, if he does know who this money belongs to, let's say he was, he was a thief, and so some of his money is stolen and the other is halal. In this case, if he knows who the owner of the stolen funds is, then he cannot give the khums to the imam and just consider this money as halal. In this case, he will need to pay the share of the owner back, and then the rest of his money is considered halal. So it's only in the case where he doesn't know who this illegitimate money belongs to and how much it is. In that case, he would pay the khums, 1/5 or 20% of the money to the imam, and the rest can be considered as halal. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to anyone who's listening, I'd appreciate it if they could write something in the comments box and I could definitely repeat it. Okay, I think that was enough time. I'm not receiving anything. It's clear. Okay, good. So, number 7, unspent money after the expenditure of a year. Now, this applies to the average Joe, because alhamdulillah, neither I nor you are are thieves, and I'm pretty sure that none of you have engaged in any war that had the permission of the imam, and I'm pretty sure that you guys are not divers, professional divers, and I think that's about it. And you don't work in mines for yourself. So the one that applies to all of us is unspent money after the expenditure of a year. Okay, someone says, won't money taken in the form of bribes would be halal when khums paid? So it depends on what sort of bribe you're talking about. If it's the haram bribe, then yes, that would be haram money because you received the money on grounds that are not accepted in the Sharia, in Islam. So yes, if you received bribes and you knew who gave you those bribes, in that case, you'll need to return their money to them. But if you don't know who the owner of the money is, and it's mixed in with your halal money, the money that you made while working at your local House of Representatives, in this case, because you can't differentiate between the haram and the halal money, in this case you'll need to pay the khums. However, if you know for sure, like if you have a separate bank account for the bribes, then you know that this is haram money. You can't touch that. You cannot pay the khums of that money and the rest becomes halal. That is not correct. The entire thing needs to go to the imam. The imam needs to, or the representative of the imam, which is the marja', he needs to tell you what you're going to be able to do with that money. But the case that we're talking about is when you have acquired money through haram means and you've acquired money through halal means, and now they're mixed and you can't tell which is halal and which is haram. In this case, you pay khums. So, unspent money after the expenditure of a year. You work and paycheck to paycheck, they come into your account. All of that is yours. You can buy a car, you can buy a house, you can buy a good computer, you can do all of that. At the end of the year, anything that is left, khums applies to that. So, I think I mentioned this, I'll mention it again. You make $100,000 a year. To make it more simple, I'll use a good number, an easy number. You make $100,000 a year, and you happen to spend $50,000 of the $100,000 throughout the year, from the first paycheck that you received. You pay nothing on the money that you've spent. It's about the $50,000 that you have left after the expenditure of the year. This khums applies to that. Now, inshallah, we'll be discussing each and every one of those. Now, number one, the spoils of war. Again, as I mentioned, this is something that the Quran points to and numerous ahadith point to as well. Now, unfortunately, I had forgotten to put in the ahadith, and so I put them in a separate file, which I will put up right now. So this is the hadith that relates to the spoils of war, or booty, or the gains of war, or whatever you want to talk. You want to name it. So this hadith, according to a lot of our scholars, the school of thought that that I adhere to, Ayatollah Sistani, this hadith is an authentic hadith. عن أبي جعفر إمام الباقر عليه السلام, he says كل شيء قُتل عليه على شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله فإن لنا خمسه. Anything that there is a war over with the banner of أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. In other words, one side are the Muslims, the other side are the non-Muslims. Anything that you gain from this war, we own 20% of it. ولا يحل لأحد أن يشتري من الخمس شيئا حتى يصل إلينا حقنا. And no one is able to spend of the khums until this money reaches us, until you give us our property. So yes, Brother Taqi Haidar has put up the hadith. However, he's put in the source of Kitab al-Muqni'ah. The one that I'm reading is from Kitab al-Kafi. Unfortunately, again, because I didn't have enough time, I didn't put the reference in, but Brother Haidar has graciously done that for me. It doesn't have the volume though, but that's fine. Point is, the hadith is authentic in Kitab al-Kafi. Now there's a minor issue. Well, depends on how you look at it, but Ayatollah Khoi may disagree and may not accept the authenticity of this hadith. However, this is not the only hadith that this ruling is based on. Again, if you have any issue with this hadith, then you could just refer back to the Quran. So, going back to... Oops, okay. Alright, so the spoils of war, that's what we're talking about. In a war that has the permission of the Imam alayhi salam or his appointed representative. Now, there's a reason why I stress the word appointed representative, because we have two types of representatives. We have the Na'ib al-Am, the general representative of the Imam, which are the Maraja, the scholars. Ayatollah Khoi, Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Modarresi, these are the general representatives of the Imams alayhimus salam. And then there is a selected representative, and those are the people that the Imam himself selects. And if you have any misconception about that, you can write it in the questions box, and inshallah I'll talk about it a little, how, what the difference between these two are. However, if the Imam alayhi salam gives a permission to the believers to wage a war, or his personal representative, which is Al-Hussein ibn Ruh, or Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri, Muhammad ibn Uthman al-Amri al-Samari. These were the representatives of Imam al-Zaman, as you all know. If these give the permission from the Imam alayhi salam to wage a war, In that case, anything that is gained from that war, 1/5, 20% of it, is the Imam's alayhi salam. Now, we'll talk about some other things that are the property of the Imam as well. So, anything that is left over after the victory of the Muslims is considered war booty, both in the land of the war and the land of the disbelievers. Let's say that that there's a war in Turkey, and these disbelievers are from Germany, and the believers are from Iraq. But the war happens in Turkey. Anything that the enemies leave in Turkey is yours, as well as anything that they have in Germany. So this ruling isn't exclusive to the things that they carry with them during the war, but rather anything that they own, whether at the time of the war they had brought it with them to Turkey, or they had in their homeland. So all of those are yours. Now there's a slight dispute about the lands, about whether or not their land, Khums applies to their land, or that the land is actually the property of the Muslims. And there's a dispute between scholars, and I don't want to get into it. However, what we want to point out is this, that their properties that they have with them, that they brought with them during the war, are now considered war gains and war booty. 20% of it is given to the Imam, and anything that they have in their homeland, 20% of that is also given to the Imam alayhi salam. The exception to this rule is the properties of the Muslims in those areas. So if there's something that was stolen from the Muslims, let's say that there was a diamond by the name of Kohinoor, and they had stolen from us, then Khums does not apply to the diamond. The diamond is given to its owner. And so when it has an owner, 1/5 or 20% does not apply to that, where you could give it to the Imam. It could, however, be in the expenditure of a year. So 20% would apply with that ruling, but not with the ruling of the spoils of war. And also, another exception is the property of non-Muslims that the Muslims have a treaty with. Or let's say, non-Muslims who live in the Muslim land. And those are the people that are protected by the government of Islam. And so if I want to make it more basic and simple, I'd say that if Islam has commanded us to protect a certain individual and their property, then you cannot take that away and call it a spoil of war and pay 20% of that to the Imam, because these have an owner, and the owner is someone who is protected by Islam, and so this is not considered as booty of war. Now, the property of the king of the disbelievers, as well as his gifts to his friends and family, as well as things that the Imam chooses for himself, these are exclusively for the Imam. And so if there's a castle, and the castle contains thousands and thousands of pounds of jewelry, none of that goes to the Muslims. The Muslims cannot claim to take that and call it spoil of war and then pay 20% of it to the Imam. Because this was the property of the king, then this is wholly given to the Imam alayhi salam. And so these three instances, one, the property of the king, the gifts of the king to his friends and family, as well as the things that the Imam chooses himself, these are for the Imam. These are not for the Muslims. These are not spoils of war. Even though technically they are spoils of war, but the ruling that applies to spoils of war does not apply here. Now, what happens if this war was waged without the permission of the Imam? Well, in that case, everything, all the spoils, all the booty, they go to the Imam alayhi salam. None of it is returned back to the Muslims. This, we can relate this back to something that I mentioned in the last session. Anything and everything, according to numerous ahadith, is the property of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam then gave it to his representative. And so this changed hands from representative to the other. And so everything that we have now is the property of the Imam. Then the Imam chooses to, out of pure grace, the Imam chooses to give us 80% of these things. In that case, we take the 80% and we leave the 20% that he initially had ownership of. We leave it back for the Imam. And so a war that is waged without the permission of the Imam alayhi salam, the spoils of that war go directly to the Imam, even if it was not it was a war, it was a defensive war. So like what happened with Daesh in Iraq. Even though that was a defensive war, and now we'll need to talk a little bit deeper about this in the topic of jihad. However, scholars, this is the most popular opinion if I'm not mistaken, say that you cannot wage a war without the permission of the Imam alayhi salam. So that's a big no-no. However, what you can do without the permission of the Imam is to defend yourself in a war. So if the enemy attacks you, then you don't need the permission of the Imam to defend yourself. Now let's assume that you defended yourself and you did it really well and you defeated the enemies. What the enemy leaves behind are not spoils of war, and therefore you cannot take ownership of those things. Those are reserved for the Imam alayhi salam. So, if the war is waged without the permission of the Imam, even if it is a defensive war, then all the spoils are reserved for the Imam alayhi salam. So that is the topic, the issue of the spoils of war. Next, we'll be talking about minerals. Again, for this, I'll be referring to some of the hadith. So, in an authentic hadith in Kitab Al-Khisal by Shaykh Al-Saduq, he says, سمعت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام, Ammar ibn Marwan says, I heard Imam Sadiq عليه السلام say, فيما يخرج من المعادن والبحر والغنيمة والحلال المختلط بالحرام إذا لم يعرف صاحبه والكنوز الخمس. This is a very detailed hadith. The Imam عليه السلام says that in the minerals, in the treasures of the sea, and in the gains and spoils of war, and the halal that is mixed with haram, if the owner, the original owner, was not known, and the treasures, you need to pay khums. Now, the Imam didn't mention two other rulings. We'll need to look at the other hadith, inshallah, later on. However, the Imam alayhi salam explicitly says that khums applies to minerals. The second hadith, again an authentic hadith. عن الحلبي في حديث قال سألت أبا عبد الله Ubaidullah al-Halabi says that I asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about treasures. كم فيه, how much do I need to pay over the treasures that I find? قال الخمس, 1/5 applies to this, applies to the treasure. And then he said, I asked him وعن المعادن, what about the minerals? How much do I need to pay for the minerals? The Imam says again, al-khums. He says, then I asked him about lead and copper and iron and all other minerals. How much do I need to pay for those? So again, a very detailed question. The Imam says, يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهَا كَمَا يُؤْخَذ مِنْ مَعَادِنِ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ. The Imam says anything that applies to gold and silver applies to all of the things that you asked for and mentioned. And again, we have a hadith that say that you need to pay 1/5 for over gold and silver. The third hadith, عن Muhammad ibn Muslim. Muhammad ibn Muslim asks Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. He says, سألته عن معادن الذهب والفضة والصفر والحديد والرصاص. I asked him about gold and silver and copper and iron and lead. فقال عليها الخمس جميعا. You need to pay 1/5 over all of those things. So this is what we understand when we refer back to the ahadith. Now, with regards to the rulings, here is what sorry, I need to get used to this platform. Okay, so here's what scholars say. I'm sorry, just one moment. Okay, that's what happens when you record at home. Okay, I kind of knew that this would happen. I'm sorry. So, here is what the scholars say about the ruling over minerals. All minerals, again, as I mentioned, whether they're solid or liquid or gas. So solid would be gold, silver, copper, all of those things. Liquid would be things like oil. And gas, is it called LPG, by the way? I'm not sure. I think it's LPG. These are all subjects of khums. Khums applies to all of these things. However, there's a precondition, and that is that it needs to reach the threshold. The threshold is called, in Arabic, it's called the nisab. It needs to reach a set amount for khums to apply to it. And that threshold is that it needs to be worth more than 85.3 grams of minted gold. So it needs to be worth more than 20 dinars of gold coins. Now there's a difference between minted gold and gold that you find in a mine. Obviously, those who have ever bought even a little bit of gold know that there's a money that is charged over the process of minting the gold. So if the mineral that you extract is worth more than 85.3 grams or 3.01 ounces of minted gold, then khums applies to that. Now, there's a difference between Ayatollah Modarresi and Ayatollah Sistani here. I think at the end, Ayatollah Sistani, his ruling is also the same as Ayatollah Modarresi's, and that is that this threshold is a net threshold. In other words, this is after you have deducted all the money that you spent on the extraction process. So let's say that you couldn't do it yourself, and you called for help, and you got a friend of yours, or any person to help you out with this, and they said that they will charge you a certain amount, and after you've deducted what your friend or colleague charged you, um, the mineral that you now have is worth less than the threshold, then you don't need to pay khums over that. So it only applies to the net of 85.3 grams of minted gold. I hope that makes sense. Now, the threshold is 20 gold dinars, and each gold dinar weighed 4.265 grams. I don't know why I didn't check it up in ounces, but you guys can do it yourselves. So each dinar is 4.265 grams, and so 20 dinars would equate to 85.3 grams. Now, it doesn't matter whether you, the person that extracts the mineral, does it all at once, or does it at different stages. Maybe you didn't have enough time, or you didn't feel like extracting gold in one day, so you did it in a span of a week or a month or a year. In fact, Ayatollah Sistani says it doesn't matter how long it takes. Even if it takes 10 years, you'll still need to pay khums. However, the exception is that if you gave up on mining, so you mined gold, and you acquired 42 grams of gold, and then you gave up on the occupation of mining. You gave up on mining altogether for 20, 30 years, where common sense does not call you someone who mines. In that case, if you go out and mine again, and you extract the equivalent of what would get you to the threshold, then in that case khums does not apply. But I think you all understand what I'm trying to say, is that whether you do it all at once or do it at different stages, khums is going to apply to that. Okay, so someone says, is khums only applicable for extraction or even purchasing? No, we are only talking about extraction. If you buy 85 grams of gold, you don't need to pay khums over that as a mineral, but you may have to pay khums for it as the expenditure of a year, of the leftover of the expenditure of the year. We'll talk about that later on, inshallah. Now, if a number of people work together collectively on this project of extraction, you all get together and you think, you know what, since we're all young and strong and powerful, let's go to a mine and let's find some gold. And everyone finds a little bit of gold, but even though you acquire quite a bit of gold, the share of each and every one of you does not equate to the threshold, then khums does not apply to any of you. Whoever reaches the threshold, so it doesn't matter if the amount of gold reaches the threshold. It's about what you own of what is extracted. Khums applies there. And finally, if there's confusion regarding the amount. So I've extracted a little bit of gold. I don't know if this has reached the price of 85.3 grams of minted gold. I don't even know how much gold is worth. In this case, you do not need to pay the khums. Khums only applies once you make sure that you have reached the threshold. However, this doesn't mean that you have the ability to check the price of what you have extracted and you give up on that. No, if you are able to check, then as a matter of obligatory precaution, you'll need to check the price of what you have extracted. However, if there's no way that you can know the price of what you have extracted, in that case, khums does not apply. With that, inshallah, we will we'll take a few questions. We only have about 10 minutes. MashaAllah, 20 questions already. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid wa alaikum salam. I want to ask you, say there are two partners in a business. One does not believe in giving khums, but the other does. How do they take khums out from the business if the partner does not agree? So, do you own 50% of the business? If you do own 50% of the business, then 20% of what you own is khums. Well, 20% of what is left over from the expenditure of a year. But firstly, you don't need to pay directly from the business. So let's say that you have a plot of land. You and a friend, you own this collectively. And you want to give 20% of this land to the imam. But you can't because there's a lot of legality involved, or there's an issue of how the which partner gets which part and all of that. Khums applies to 20% of this. What happens is you don't need to pay directly from the land. If you have money, if you have liquidity, then you can pay cash as a replacement to the piece of land that the Imam alayhi salam owns in your land. So you don't need to pay directly from the business. If you have cash with you, or you're able to extract some of your share of the company, then you can do that. You can pay it as a replacement. Someone says, is bribe itself not haram? Yes, bribe, if you translate bribe to rishwa in Arabic, rishwa is haram in Islam. However, there are places where receiving a bribe is haram, paying a bribe would not be haram. And I don't want to get into too many details, but I'm just trying to think about an instance where it wouldn't be inappropriate to mention it. Let's say that you live in a society that is ruled by Nasibis, and one of the Nasibis took over your land, and it's yours. And even some of your Nasibi neighbors agree that this plot of land belongs to you. But there's no way for you to get that plot of land back because the society has a judiciary system that is ruled by a bunch of Nasibis. The only way for you to get your piece of land back is to pay a bribe. It is haram for the judge to take that money from you because he has no grounds to take that money from you. However, it wouldn't be haram for you to pay that money. I hope that answers the question. And there are a lot of instances where this example applies. And I think, inshallah, you're intelligent enough. You are, I'm sure, to think about those. Okay, someone says, when it comes to investments, such as stocks, is khums applicable only to the capital gained per stock or the initial investment as well? It depends. If you have paid the khums that applied to the initial investment, or the initial investment, khums did not apply to the initial investment, then in that case you don't need to pay khums over the initial investment. You do need to pay khums on what you receive from the stocks. Salam Sayyid wa alaikum salam. Please elaborate the types of representatives. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so this we'll need to kind of deconstruct some of the things that the scholars believe in. For example, there are scholars that accept wilayatul faqih. So those have a different opinion. There are those who do not accept wilayatul faqih. However, they accept the notion of al-wikala al-amma, a general representation of the imam. There are hadith in which the imams say that we have made, and a lot of these hadith are mentioned in the rulings of qada, babul qada, and those are where we talk about the judges. As you know, part of the wilaya of the imams is al-qada. It is the imams who are just judges. And so they, in some of the ahadith, the imams have clearly given the permission for the scholars to become judges. Even though, again, it's their own status, they have given this status to the scholars. And so the scholars have used these ahadiths to say that the scholars are representatives of the imam. Again, there are other hadith in which the imam alayhi salam, Imam Zaman alayhi salam, in one hadith says that I am the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the scholars are my proof to you, to the Shi'as. And so scholars like Sahibul Jawahir have said that this means that anywhere that you need the permission of the imam, anything that belongs to the imam belongs to the scholar. And the scholar is the one who chooses what to do with the belongings and the properties of the imam alayhi salam. Again, this is an issue where there are a lot of differing opinions. However, the difference between a general representative is and between a hand-picked representative is that a general representative is one that becomes a representative of the imam with these ahadith, the ahadith that have given the permission of wilaya and qada to the scholars in general, in a general sense. And then there are the ahadith in which the imam alayhi salam talks about, for example, Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri, which is the first representative of the first ambassador of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. The imam says قوله, I can't remember the hadith exactly, but the imam says that whatever he says from me, and whatever he does that from me. In other words, the imam is saying that whatever he says, these are things that I have said. Al-Amri wa ibnuhu thiqatan fama. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Ahsant, brother Hussein. Al-Amri wa ibnuhu thiqatan. The imam talks about Uthman ibn Sa'id and Muhammad ibn Uthman. He says, Al-Amri wa ibnuhu thiqatan fama addaya laka fa'anni yu'addiyan. Whatever reaches you from them is from me. وما يقول, if I'm not mistaken, عني فعني يقولان. فما. Anyway, point is that these are hand-picked representatives of the imam. These are the special representatives of the imam. And then you have the general representatives of the imam, which are the scholars. However, according to, if I'm not mistaken, Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khoi, that a war needs the permission of the imam himself, alayhi salam, or his special representative, his hand-picked representative. But of course, scholars who believe in wilayatul faqih say that there is no need for the permission of of the Imam himself. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid. Sister Ma'suma says, wa alaikum salam. She said, I have a few questions. Number one, wars waged by some Muslim countries, not the defensive ones, these days are not the ones that Imam Mahdi alayhi salam approves of and don't have the permission, such as war against Yemen. They are then against commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're talking about the Saudi side, then other than the fact that it's an oppressive war, yes, they definitely don't have the permission of the Imam. However, if you're talking about people who are supporting the Yemeni side, in that case, well, that's a defensive war because the Saudis have attacked, the Saudi side have attacked the Yemenis, and so if someone supports the Yemeni side, then they are in fact helping the Yemenis defend themselves. So this is not a war that is waged from the Yemeni side, but it's the other way around. Taxes set by the governments are then not according to Islam. If they are not, then can we deny paying them? I don't think it's a question of can you deny, because I'm sure that if you ask a lot of people, they are not happy with a lot of the taxes that they pay. But it's the question of, do you need to pay from an Islamic perspective? From an Islamic perspective, the general rule, as mentioned in the Quran, إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض ولا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل. You cannot give away money or take money through a valid transaction unless there are valid grounds. So, if you want to buy something or if you want to sell something, then you can pay money over this fake cactus plant, and so you like it as a decoration. Apparently, someone liked this enough to buy it, and so you pay money for this, and this is a valid and halal transaction. You give the $2 worth of this to the previous owner or the manufacturer, and this is a valid transaction. It's halal. But then someone comes up and gives you this weird transaction where nothing is being exchanged. You are giving money, but you're not receiving anything back. This, by the way, may apply to, and I'm not giving a ruling, but this may apply to some of the NFT transactions that are being popularized these days. If you don't know what NFT transactions are, you can Google those, where you're paying money, but what you're receiving isn't something that exists in the outside world. It's something that is only in the internet, and it's not even worth all that money. And so that transaction is an invalid transaction. Now, if we were to come and implement what I just said onto the issue of taxes, if the government or any other entity gives you something and what you're paying them is a payment back for their services, then this is a valid transaction. For example, the government sells some sort of medical insurance. This is a valid transaction. You're paying money for for some sort of service. This is halal. However, when the government doesn't offer you anything, and what it asks for is money for nothing, then this is a invalid transaction. And I guess now, by the way, the fact of it being valid or invalid doesn't really apply to the legal system. Something could be invalid, however, it could be legal. Something could be halal and valid, but could be illegal. So I'm not condoning in any way, shape, or form um, that you do anything illegal. But what I'm saying is, from a purely Islamic perspective, the GST tax, I'm not sure what the GST tax is called in the US, but this is the 10% or the 12% that applies to all the goods that you purchase. This is really quite an issue for me from an Islamic perspective. Nothing is being offered by the government, so why do I need to pay 10% to the government? But I do pay the GST. Now, I would suggest that, by the way, this when we talk about the legal contracts in Islam as a bay', as a transaction of buy and sell, it wouldn't be valid. However, you can give it up. I mean, you could choose to give 10% of anything that you purchase to the government, and surely that would be halal because you're giving away 10% of anything. So if someone chooses to give a gift to the government every single year between June and July and calls this gift taxes, then this would make it a valid transaction. In fact, this money would now be under the legal, again, Islamically, under the legal ownership of the government. So yes, to answer your question, taxes set by the government are not according to Islam, unless you either believe in wilayatul faqih, your marja' believes in wilayatul faqih, and then applies taxes through the system of wilayatul faqih. That's a different story. Or you give it up, or the government is actually offer you something in return. With that, I do have quite a number of questions. Maybe I have another 10. However, my time is up already. And with that, so Brother Aun Abbas is asking, is the Sayyid saying NFTs are wrong? Well, I'm not, again, as I mentioned, I'm not, I can't say whether NFTs are halal or haram. You'll need to refer back to your maraja'. There are maraja' that say that this is in fact invalid. And I'm sure that there are other maraja'. I think a lot of this goes back to the issue of cryptocurrency. And again, I'm not suggesting this, but it looks to me as if those scholars who accept the transactions of cryptocurrency should also accept the transactions of NFTs. However, you'll need to refer back to your marja' for more details. That is it for tonight. Inshallah, it wasn't as confusing as it sounded in my head. Please don't forget me in your du'as, especially in these holy nights. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.